Okay, so let's continue. Now we move on to 1.3, or the formality of contract of partnership, or the forms of a contract of partnership. Now, generally, it may be constituted in any form, so whether it's oral or written, because it is perfected by mere consent. There are, however, three exceptions. The first one is when it comes to immovable or real property. Under Article 1773, a contract of partnership is void whenever a movable property is contributed thereto if an inventory of said property is not made, signed by the parties, and attached to the public instrument. So, under 1773, there are two requirements. A, that it must be in a public instrument, and B, that the inventory is made and signed by the parties and attached to the public instrument. So, since it is void under 1773, if these two requirements are not met, the partnership will not have any juridical personality. Now, uh, the the public instrument must be duly recorded with the registry of deeds of the province or city where the property contributed is located in order to affect third persons. Because under our property registration laws, the registration of the registry of deeds is actually constructive notice to the world. So when you say constructive notice, it is um, not actual notice. It's by operation of law, the entire world is considered notified. Okay, so the purpose as for the inventory, its purpose is to show how much is due from each partner to complete the partner share in the common fund, and how much is due to each of them in case of liquidation. Now, what if there is personal property contributed along with real property? Now, if you look at 1773, it says here that an inventory must be made of immovable property. Therefore, if there is personal property, there is no requirement to include personal property to the inventory. But if you include personal property to the inventory, of course, that's allowed now. I'm just clarifying that failure to include personal property in the inventory will not make the partnership contract void. All right. Now, second exception is when the capital is 3,000 pesos or more. Under Article 1772, every contract of partnership having a capital of 3,000 pesos or more in money or property shall appear in a public instrument, which must be recorded in the Office of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Failure to comply with the requirements of the preceding paragraph shall not affect the liability of the partnership and the members thereof to third persons. So, under this article, there are still two requirements. A, the execution of a public instrument, right here. And B, the registration with the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. Now, it says here 3,000 in money or property. All right, not just money. But the difference between 1772 and 1773 earlier is that here in 1772, the failure to comply with this requirement of creating a public instrument and recording in the Securities and Exchange Commission will not affect the validity of the partnership contract. Why? Because under Article 1768, which we already discussed a while ago, a partnership has a juridical personality separate and distinct from that of each of the partners, even in case of failure to comply with the requirements of Article 1772, first paragraph. Alright, so the reason for this requirement is that the law recognizes that most partnerships are created with small capital, and it would be impractical and inconvenient to require partnerships to comply with 1772. However, this was created, you see, the civil code was created even before the family code. Therefore, 3,000 pesos was a significant amount then. Now that we're in the year 2020, 3,000 pesos to start a business is actually extremely small, as most businesses would require more than 3,000. So, what is the reason? However, it's good that 1772 and 1768 clarify that if you don't make a public instrument and don't record it with the SEC, it will not affect the partnership. Otherwise, there will be a lot of partnerships today that might not be recognized because, of course, not everyone knows this requirement. What is the reason for SEC registration? Now, the SEC requires it for the issuance of a business license. It also enables local government and the Bureau of Internal Revenue to assess the partnership's tax liabilities. Also, registration enables third persons to determine the composition of the firm and its capital before dealing with its members. There. So, what if, there's a question, what if the partners do not execute a public instrument in accordance with this article? Now, under Article 1357, let's write that down here, of the Civil Code, if the law requires a document or other special form, as in the acts and contracts enumerated in the following article, which I don't need to discuss anymore, the contracting parties may compel each other to observe that form once the contract has been perfected. So, at least if a partner, say for example, partner A wants a public instrument executed, but partner B does not do so, A can actually compel B to execute one in accordance with Article 1357. There. So, if you look again, before I move on to a Supreme Court case about registration, it is worthy to note that 1772, as I've already pointed out a while ago, refers to 3,000 pesos in money or property. Now, since number 1 involves immovable property, and most pieces of property right now are definitely more than 3,000 pesos, it is important to consider Article 1772 with Article 1773, meaning if a partner will be contributing real property or immovable property, aside from executing a public instrument and making an inventory on the real property, they should also record it with the SEC or the Securities Exchange Commission. Alright. Now, if I may quickly discuss the case of Torres versus Court of Appeals. Now, this case is about a joint venture agreement for the development of a parcel of land between sisters Antonia Torres and Emeteria Baring, and I think their brother Manuel Torres, who is the respondent here. Now, what happened is that the sisters executed a deed of sale covering a parcel of land in favor of Manuel, who registered the land in his name. So, they were supposed to develop this property. What happened was, Manuel mortgaged the property with Equitable Bank, which is now BDO, in exchange for a 40,000 peso loan. And then they agreed that the three of them, the sisters and Manuel, will share in the proceeds of the sale once they're able to develop these lots. But the project did not push through, and the land, because they failed to pay the Equitable Bank 40,000, the land was subsequently foreclosed. Now, what happened was that the sisters, they denied that a partnership was formed and said that the joint venture agreement was void. Now, the RTC, the Regional Trial Court and the Court of Appeal said that there was a partnership. And the Court of Appeals applied Article 1797, which I've briefly discussed in a previous video, talked about the distribution of profits and losses in accordance with the agreement. So, the Supreme Court, I'll just discuss the important points, no? The Supreme Court here said that under Article 1773, was intended to protect third persons. In this case kasi, the parties did not execute a public instrument and did not register it with the Registry of Deeds. That's why the sisters were saying there was no partnership because they failed to comply with Article 1773. Note, as I've mentioned earlier, failure to comply with 1773 will make the partnership void. The Supreme Court qualified this case citing Attorney Tolentino, who is a very known author, even especially for law students and lawyers alike. Now, it said there in this case, no, that this requirement is to affect third parties. So, because this case did not involve any third party, the Supreme Court upheld the partnership to be valid. And on a side note, the Supreme Court noted the irony that the sisters deny the existence of a partnership because they did not execute a public instrument in accordance with 1773, but they also invoke the partnership in the partnership contract to claim their share in the property. So, that's one of the unique points of that Supreme Court case. Anyway, the point of this case, Torres versus Court of Appeal, is that this is an exception to 1773. The Supreme Court eventually made an exception by saying that the partnership is valid even if they failed to comply with 1773 because there were no third persons affected by in this case. Just in this case. It's okay. So the third exception is when it comes to a limited partnership. Now, under Article 1844, they must also execute a certificate of limited partnership and must be recorded with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Now, non-compliance with the requirement of creating a certificate of limited partnership under Article 1844, now let me just write that down for your reference. We will discuss this later on. Non-compliance with this requirement will not invalidate the partnership, but it will make the limited partners liable as general partners to the partnership's creditors. But these limited partners will remain limited just to their co-partners. So, for example, in this case, if this is So in this case, I'll just rewrite Article 1844 for your reference. Okay. So if in this case, A is a limited partner and B is a general partner, if these partners failed to execute a certificate of limited partnership, A is still a limited partner in relation to B, but if ever there are liabilities to say C, A will be considered a general partner only to C. I hope that's clear. So I'll end this video now since it's a short one so that we can continue on the next video to 1.4 or the kinds of partnership.